Part 1. The Mafia boss saw his curvy assistant on a date and lost control instantly. The office lights were still on at 9 p.m. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago. Only one light stayed on, in the biggest office on the top floor. That was where Sophia was working. Sophia was 27 years old. She had curly brown hair, a curvy figure, and warm eyes that made people trust her right away. She had worked as the personal assistant to Marco Rossi for almost 2 years now. Marco was not a normal boss. Everyone in the city knew his real business. On paper, he owned hotels, restaurants, and shipping companies. But underneath all that, Marco Rossi controlled the biggest crime family in the city. Sophia knew this. Everyone who worked close to Marco knew this. But Sophia had learned to separate the man from the business. To her, Marco was simply her boss. A strict boss, a demanding boss. But never once had he been unkind to her. That night, Sophia was finishing some paperwork when Marco walked out of his office. He was tall, with dark hair, sharp jaw, and cold gray eyes that made most people look away. But Sophia never looked away. She was the only person in the building who spoke to him without fear in her voice. "You should go home, Sophia," Marco said, checking his watch. "It's late." "Just finishing the Milan contracts," Sophia replied, not looking up from her laptop. 5 more minutes." Marco watched her for a moment longer than necessary. He often did that lately, though he did not fully understand why. Sophia was efficient, smart, and calm under pressure, qualities he valued in his work. But there was something else about her that made him pause, something he refused to think about too deeply. "Fine," he said finally. 5 minutes. Then go home." Sophia smiled slightly and continued typing. Marco walked back into his office, closing the door softly behind him. 2 days later, Marco had a rare free evening. His right-hand man, Vincent, suggested they eat at a new Italian restaurant downtown, one of Marco's own restaurants, actually. Marco agreed, mostly because he was hungry and tired of ordering food to his office. They arrived at the restaurant around 8 p.m. The place was elegant, quiet, with soft lighting and candles on every table. Marco was led to his usual private booth near the back. As he sat down, his eyes scanned the room out of habit, a habit built from years of watching for danger. That is when he saw her, Sophia, sitting at a table near the window. She was wearing a soft red dress, her curly hair falling over her shoulders. She looked beautiful, relaxed, and happy. Across from her sat a man Marco did not recognize. A young man, maybe her age, smiling at her like she was the only person in the room. Marco felt something strange in his chest, something tight and uncomfortable. He told himself it was nothing important. Sophia had every right to have a personal life. She was not his property. She was his employee, nothing more. But his eyes stayed locked on the table anyway. "Boss," Vincent said, noticing Marco was distracted. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Marco said sharply, forcing his eyes back to the menu. But his mind was not on the food anymore. Throughout dinner, Marco found himself glancing at Sophia's table again and again. He watched the young man reach across the table and hold her hand. He watched Sophia laugh at something the man said, her whole face lighting up in a way Marco had never seen at the office. Something inside Marco twisted painfully. He gripped his wine glass a little too tightly. "You're quiet tonight," Vincent commented, watching his boss carefully. Vincent had known Marco for 15 years. He rarely saw Marco lose focus like this. "Just thinking about business," Marco lied. But it was not business on his mind. It was the way Sophia smiled at another man. It was the way her laughter carried across the restaurant, light and free, so different from the professional tone she used at the office. Marco realized, with growing frustration, that he wanted to hear that laughter directed at him. He wanted to be the reason for that smile. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. Marco Rossi, a man who controlled fear itself, a man who never lost control of his emotions, was suddenly struggling to breathe normally. "Excuse me," Marco said abruptly, standing up. "Boss, where are you?" Vincent started, but Marco was already walking away from the table. He did not walk toward Sophia. Instead, he walked toward the restroom, needing a moment to gather himself. Inside, he stood in front of the mirror, staring at his own reflection, breathing hard. "What is wrong with you?" he whispered to himself. He had faced armed enemies without fear. He had made life-and-death decisions without hesitation. But the sight of his assistant smiling at another man had shaken him more than any gun pointed at his head ever had. When Marco walked back to his table, his eyes could not help but glance at Sophia's table one more time. This time, Sophia noticed him. Her eyes widened in surprise, recognizing her boss standing across the restaurant. For a moment, their eyes locked. Sophia's smile faded slightly, replaced by confusion. Marco's expression was unreadable, cold and controlled once again, hiding the storm happening inside him. He gave her a small, polite nod, like a boss acknowledging an employee by chance, nothing more. Then he turned and walked back to his booth, sitting down heavily. But as dinner continued, Marco could not shake the feeling building inside him. A dangerous, unfamiliar feeling. He wanted Sophia, not just as his assistant, and Marco Rossi was a man who always got what he wanted. The question was, what was he willing to do to get it? The next morning, Sophia arrived at the office at her usual time, 8:30 a.m. She was still thinking about the strange moment at the restaurant. Seeing Marco there, sitting alone with that unreadable look on his face, had confused her all night. She barely slept, wondering why her boss's cold nod had bothered her so much. She walked into the office building, greeted the security guard like always, and took the elevator up to the top floor. When she reached her desk outside Marco's office, she noticed something odd immediately. Marco's office door was open, and he was already there, standing by the window, looking out at the city. He was usually never in before 9 a.m. "Good morning," Sophia said carefully, setting her bag down at her desk. Marco turned around slowly. His face looked tired, like he had not slept well either. His eyes studied her for a moment longer than usual. "Morning," he said, his voice flatter than normal. "Come into my office. We need to discuss the Milan contracts." Sophia nodded, grabbing her laptop and notebook, and followed him inside. She sat in the chair across from his large desk, opening her laptop to pull up the files. "The contracts are ready for your signature," she began, turning her screen toward him. "I finished them the night we—" "Who was he?" Marco interrupted suddenly. Sophia blinked, confused. "Who?" "Last night. The restaurant. The man you were with." Sophia's cheeks turned slightly pink, surprised by the sudden question. "That was a personal matter, Mr. Rossi, not related to work." "I am asking anyway," Marco said, his voice firm, almost commanding. Sophia straightened in her chair, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and irritation. In 2 years, Marco had never asked her a personal question like this. "His name is Daniel," she said slowly. "We met a few weeks ago. It was our second date." Marco's jaw tightened almost unnoticeably, but Sophia caught it. She had learned to read his small expressions over the years, tiny signs most people never noticed. "Is it serious?" Marco asked, his tone still hard to read. "With respect, sir," Sophia said carefully, "I don't think my personal life is something we need to discuss during work hours." Marco stared at her for a long moment. Something in his gray eyes flickered, frustration, maybe even something close to jealousy, though Sophia could not believe that was possible. Marco Rossi did not get jealous. He was not capable of feelings like that. At least, that is what everyone believed. "You're right," Marco said finally, looking back down at his desk. "Let's continue with the contracts." Sophia continued the meeting, though she noticed Marco was unusually distracted throughout. He barely looked at the documents she presented. Normally, he reviewed every detail carefully, asking sharp questions about numbers and terms. Today, he simply nodded along, his mind clearly somewhere else. When the meeting ended, Sophia stood up to leave, but Marco spoke again before she reached the door. "Sophia." She turned back. "Yes." Marco hesitated, something Sophia had never seen him do before. He was always confident, always certain of his words. "Be careful," he said finally, "with this Daniel person. Men are not always what they appear to be." Sophia frowned slightly. "I appreciate the concern, Mr. Rossi, but I can take care of myself." "I know you can," Marco said quietly. That is not what worries me. Sophia did not fully understand his words, but something about his tone made her chest feel tight. She nodded slowly and left the office, closing the door behind her. Over the next few days, Marco's behavior grew stranger. He started asking Sophia to stay later at the office, even when there was no real urgent work. He began commenting on small things, her dress, her earrings, the way she wore her hair. Small comments, always professional on the surface, but carrying something underneath that made Sophia's heart beat faster each time. One afternoon, Vincent noticed Marco watching Sophia through the glass office window as she worked at her desk outside. "Boss," Vincent said carefully, closing the office door behind him. "Can I speak freely?" Marco did not look away from the window. "Go ahead." "You've been different lately," Vincent said. "Ever since that night at the restaurant. It's about Sophia, isn't it?" Marco's silence was answer enough. "Boss, she works for you," Vincent continued carefully. "This could get complicated. Dangerous, even, considering our world." Marco finally turned to face his friend, his gray eyes hard and determined. "I know exactly how dangerous it could be, Vincent, but I have never wanted anything the way I want this." Vincent sighed heavily. He had known Marco long enough to recognize that look. Once Marco decided he wanted something, nothing stopped him from getting it. "And Daniel?" Vincent asked. "The boyfriend." Marco's expression darkened slightly. "I looked into him already." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "And, let's just say," Marco said slowly, walking back to his desk, "Daniel is not exactly the honest man Sophia believes him to be." Vincent's eyes widened slightly. "What did you find?" Marco sat down, his fingers tapping slowly on the desk, his mind already working on a plan. "Enough to make sure," Marco said quietly, "that Sophia sees the truth very soon." Outside, unaware of the conversation happening behind the glass, Sophia continued working at her desk, humming softly to herself, completely unaware that her boss was about to change the course of her life forever. 3 days passed. Sophia noticed Marco watching her more than usual, but she pushed the thought away. She had a big weekend planned. Daniel had invited her to meet some of his friends at a rooftop party downtown. She was excited, wearing a new blue dress she had bought just for the occasion. But that Friday afternoon, everything changed. Sophia was at her desk, finishing the last emails before the weekend, when Marco called her into his office. His face was serious, more serious than she had ever seen it. "Close the door," he said quietly. Sophia's stomach tightened with worry. She closed the door and sat down across from him. "Is something wrong with the contracts?" "This is not about work," Marco said. He slid a folder across the desk toward her. "This is about Daniel." Sophia frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "Open it," Marco said simply. Sophia hesitated, then opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, bank records. Her eyes scanned quickly, her confusion turning slowly into shock. The photos showed Daniel with another woman, laughing, holding hands, kissing at a cafe Sophia had never been to. The documents showed bank transfers, unusual amounts of money moving between accounts she did not recognize. "What is this?" Sophia whispered, her hands trembling slightly. "Daniel has been seeing someone else for the past 2 months," Marco said, his voice steady but careful. "Her name is Clara. She works at a marketing firm downtown. He has been telling her the same things he tells you." Sophia's chest felt tight, like she could not breathe properly. "How do you know all this?" "I had him investigated," Marco admitted. Sophia looked up sharply, anger flashing in her eyes. "You had him investigated? Why would you do that? This is my personal life, Marco." It was the first time she had called him by his first name, not Mr. Rossi. Marco noticed, but said nothing about it. "Because I care about what happens to you," Marco said quietly, "and because something about him felt wrong from the beginning." Sophia stood up, angry tears forming in her eyes. "You had no right to interfere. What if you're wrong? What if this is some kind of mistake, or a trick to make me distrust him?" "There is more," Marco said, ignoring her anger. "The money in his accounts. It is not from his job. He works a normal office job, Sophia. He could never afford the things he has bought you. The restaurants he has taken you to. Sophia's anger slowly turned into confusion. Then where does the money come from? Marco's face grew darker. He borrowed money from dangerous people. People who work for a rival family in this city. He owes them a large amount, and he has been unable to pay it back. Sophia sat back down slowly, her legs feeling weak. Why would that matter to me? Because, Marco said carefully, there is a strong possibility he began seeing you not by accident, but because he learned you work closely with me. People who lend money like that often look for ways to get close to powerful families. Through relationships. Through information. Sophia's face went pale. You think Daniel used me? To get close to you? I think it is possible, Marco said, and I could not let you continue seeing him without knowing the truth. Tears finally fell down Sophia's cheeks, though she tried hard to hold them back. 2 years of trusting her instincts, of believing she understood people well, and she had completely missed this. I'm sorry, Marco said, his voice softening in a way Sophia had rarely heard before. I know this is difficult to hear. Why do you even care? Sophia asked quietly, wiping her tears. This has nothing to do with business. Marco was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more honest than she had ever heard from him. Because ever since that night at the restaurant, he said slowly, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Not as my assistant, as something more. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, shocked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Marco, I know this is inappropriate. Marco continued quickly, standing up and walking toward the window, his back turned to her. I know you work for me. I know the rules I have always followed about keeping business and personal life separate, but I cannot pretend anymore. Sophia stood slowly, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. She had spent 2 years telling herself that her growing feelings for her mysterious, dangerous boss were simply admiration, nothing more. But standing here now, seeing him vulnerable for the first time, she realized she had been lying to herself. Marco, she said softly, walking closer to him. He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers carefully, looking for rejection, for anger, for anything that would tell him he had made a terrible mistake by revealing his feelings. Instead, he saw something else in Sophia's eyes, something that looked a lot like hope. I need time, Sophia whispered. This is a lot to process. Daniel, and now this. Take all the time you need, Marco said quietly. I am not going anywhere. Sophia nodded slowly, wiping the last of her tears away. She picked up the folder from the desk, her mind spinning with everything she had just learned. As she walked toward the door, she paused, turning back to look at Marco one more time. Thank you, she said softly, for telling me the truth, even if it was hard to hear. Marco simply nodded, watching her leave his office, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that he had finally told her the truth about his feelings. Fear that she might still choose to walk away from everything, from Daniel, from the danger, and perhaps even from him. But as Sophia closed the door behind her, she could not deny the truth that had settled deep inside her heart. Her feelings for Marco Rossi were far stronger than she had ever allowed herself to admit. And now, there was no way to pretend otherwise. Sophia did not go home that evening. Instead, she sat in her car in the office parking lot for almost an hour, staring at the folder Marco had given her. Her mind kept replaying the photographs, the bank records, and most of all, Marco's words. I have not been able to stop thinking about you. She finally started her car and drove, not toward her apartment, but toward Daniel's place. She needed answers. She needed to hear the truth from his own mouth, no matter how painful it would be. Daniel opened the door with a surprised smile. Sophia, I wasn't expecting you until the party tomorrow. Who is Clara? Sophia asked, cutting him off immediately. Daniel's smile froze on his face. For just a second, his eyes widened with panic before he tried to cover it. What? I don't know what you're talking about. Sophia pulled out her phone and showed him one of the photographs Marco had given her. Daniel's face went pale. Sophia, let me explain. And the money, Sophia continued, her voice shaking but firm. "The money you owe to dangerous people." Daniel's expression shifted from panic to something colder, something Sophia had never seen from him before. "Who told you this? Was it Rossi? Did your boss have me followed?" "Answer my question, Daniel," Sophia said. "Were you ever really interested in me? Or was this always about getting close to Marco?" Daniel was silent for a long moment, and that silence told Sophia everything she needed to know. Her heart broke, but strangely, not as much as she expected. Perhaps some part of her had already accepted the truth before she arrived. "It started that way," Daniel finally admitted, his voice quiet. "The men I owe money to, they wanted information about Rossi's operations. They said if I got close to his assistant, I could learn things, pass along details. But Sophia, somewhere along the way, my feelings became real. I promise you that." "Real feelings do not involve using someone," Sophia said, tears finally falling down her cheeks, though they were tears of anger now, not sadness. "Real feelings do not involve lying every single day." "Sophia, please. Stay away from me," Sophia said firmly, stepping back. "And stay away from Marco Rossi's business. If those men come near me again, I promise you, the consequences will be far worse than anything you can imagine." She turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing in his doorway, calling her name uselessly into the night air. Sophia drove straight back to the office building, though it was already past 10 p.m. She was not sure why, but she needed to see Marco. She needed to tell him what happened, and more importantly, she needed to face the feelings she had been denying for far too long. The office building was quiet, most lights turned off except for the top floor. Sophia took the elevator up, her heart pounding with every passing floor. When the doors opened, she saw Marco's office light was still on. She walked in without knocking. Marco looked up from his desk, surprised to see her. "Sophia, it's late, what are you?" "I confronted Daniel," Sophia said, walking further into the room. "You were right. About everything." Marco stood up slowly, concern flooding his face. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "No," Sophia said, shaking her head. "He didn't hurt me. Not physically, anyway. But Marco, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Anything," Marco said. "Earlier, you said you have feelings for me," Sophia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Was that true? Or was it just concern for my safety?" Marco walked around his desk, closing the distance between them slowly. His gray eyes were completely focused on her, more open and vulnerable than Sophia had ever seen them. "It was true," Marco said quietly. Every word. Sophia's breath caught. "Marco, I work for you. This is complicated. Dangerous, even." "I know," Marco said. "I have thought about nothing else for days. The risks, the complications, everything that could go wrong." "And," Sophia whispered, "and I have decided," Marco said, stepping even closer, "that some things are worth the risk." Sophia's heart pounded loudly in her chest. She looked up into Marco's eyes, searching for any doubt, any hesitation. She found none. "I have feelings for you, too," Sophia admitted softly. "I have for a long time now. I was too afraid to admit it. Afraid of your world. Afraid of what it could mean for both of us." Marco reached out slowly, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering softly against her cheek. "I will protect you," Marco said quietly. "From Daniel, from the men he owes money to, from anyone who tries to hurt you. I promise you that." Sophia leaned slightly into his touch, feeling safe despite everything she knew about the dangerous world Marco lived in. "This changes everything, Marco. Our whole relationship, working together." "I know," Marco said, "but I cannot keep pretending anymore, Sophia. I do not want to." For a long moment, they simply stood there, close together, the office silent except for their breathing. Finally, Marco leaned down slowly, giving Sophia every chance to step back if she wanted to. She did not step back. Their lips met softly, gently, filled with 2 years of unspoken feelings, finally being released. When they finally pulled back, Sophia rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing just as fast as her own. This is going to be complicated, Sophia whispered. Most good things are, Marco replied softly, wrapping his arms protectively around her. But even as they stood together in that quiet office, neither of them knew that Daniel's dangerous debts were about to bring far more trouble to their door than either of them could have imagined. 2 days passed since the kiss in Marco's office. Sophia and Marco had agreed to keep things quiet for now, careful not to let anyone in the office notice the change between them. But everything else in Sophia's life had shifted. She felt lighter, happier, though a small part of her stayed anxious about Daniel and the dangerous men he owed money to. That anxiety proved right sooner than she expected. It was Wednesday evening. Sophia stayed late again, finishing some paperwork before heading home. Marco had left an hour earlier for a meeting with one of his business partners across town. The office building was quiet, most employees already gone. Sophia packed her bag and took the elevator down to the parking garage. The garage was dim, lit by flickering yellow lights. Her heels echoed against the concrete floor as she walked toward her car. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Sophia turned quickly, her heart jumping. 2 men stood a few feet away, blocking her path back to the elevator. They were big, wearing dark jackets, their faces cold and unfamiliar. "Sophia Bennett?" one of the men asked, his voice rough. Sophia's blood ran cold. "Who are you? What do you want?" "Daniel owes us a lot of money," the second man said, stepping closer. "He hasn't been able to pay. But we heard you're close to Marco Rossi." "Very close." Sophia's hands began to shake, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games," the first man said, his voice growing sharper. "You're going to help us get what we're owed, one way or another." Sophia backed away slowly, reaching into her bag for her phone. Before she could grab it, the first man lunged forward, grabbing her wrist tightly. "Let go of me," Sophia shouted, trying to pull away. "You're coming with us," the man said. "Rossi will pay a lot to get his precious assistant back safely." Sophia's mind raced with panic. She kicked hard, hitting the man in the shin, causing him to loosen his grip for just a second. She used that moment to scream as loud as she could, her voice echoing through the empty garage. Suddenly, headlights flashed as a car came speeding around the corner. Tires screeched loudly as the car stopped just feet away from them. The doors opened fast, and 3 men jumped out, Marco's men, led by Vincent himself. "Let her go," Vincent shouted, pulling out a gun and pointing it directly at the 2 attackers. The men holding Sophia froze, clearly not expecting backup to arrive so quickly. Vincent's men moved fast, surrounding them within seconds. "How did you?" Sophia started, breathless with shock. "Marco had extra security watching you," Vincent said quickly, without taking his eyes off the attackers, since the moment he found out about Daniel's debts. The 2 attackers were quickly disarmed and restrained by Vincent's men. Sophia stood shaking, trying to process everything that just happened. Within minutes, Marco arrived, practically running from his car into the garage, his face filled with fear and fury. "Sophia!" he shouted, rushing to her side. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "I'm okay," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "Just scared. Really scared." Marco pulled her into his arms tightly, holding her like he was afraid to ever let go. "I should have had more men here. I should have anticipated this sooner. I'm so sorry, Sophia." "You saved me," Sophia whispered against his chest. "Your men saved me." Marco pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes with fierce determination. "This will never happen again. I promise you that." He turned to Vincent, his expression turning cold and dangerous. "Find out everything about these men, who sent them, who they work for. I want this handled tonight." Vincent nodded seriously. "Understood, boss." As Vincent's men took the attackers away, Marco turned back to Sophia, gently cupping her face in his hands. "This is exactly what I feared. My world is dangerous, Sophia. Being close to me puts you at risk." Sophia shook her head firmly, despite her racing heart. "I don't care about the risk anymore, Marco. I care about you. We will face this together." Marco's eyes softened, filled with a mixture of relief and deep affection. "Are you certain? Once we truly begin this, There is no simple way back. My enemies will see you as a target always. I'm certain, Sophia said, her voice steady despite the fear still lingering in her body. I trust you to protect me. I trust us. Marco pulled her close again, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Then I will make sure my enemies regret ever coming near you. That night, Marco personally escorted Sophia home, insisting on placing extra security around her apartment. As Sophia finally settled into bed, exhausted from the terrifying events of the night, her phone buzzed with a message from Marco. You are safe now. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we deal with Daniel and the men who sent them. Sophia smiled softly at the message. Despite everything that had happened, she realized, more clearly than ever, that she had fallen deeply for a man from a dangerous world. But for the first time, she did not regret it. However, unknown to both Sophia and Marco, the men behind Daniel's death were part of a much larger, more dangerous organization than they realized. And this failed kidnapping attempt was only the beginning of a war that was about to unfold. Part 6. The Mafia boss saw his Curvy assistant on a date and lost control instantly. The next morning, Marco called an emergency meeting with Vincent and his top men. Sophia sat beside him, refusing to be sent home, despite Marco's protests. She wanted answers, and she wanted to understand exactly what danger she had walked into. The two men from last night talked, Vincent said, spreading photographs and documents across the table. They worked for the Carbone family. Daniel's debt was never really about Daniel. The Carbones have wanted to move into our territory for over a year. Daniel was just a small piece, a way to get close to us. Marco's jaw tightened. The Carbones sent men after Sophia to send me a message. Exactly, Vincent said. They want you distracted, weak. If they can threaten the people close to you, they think you'll make mistakes. Sophia listened carefully, her fear slowly turning into something firmer, determination. So what happens now? Marco turned to her, his gray eyes serious. Now, I make sure the Carbones understand clearly that threatening you was the worst mistake they could have made. Marco, Sophia said carefully, placing a hand on his arm. I don't want a war. I don't want people getting hurt because of me. This isn't about you causing anything, Marco said gently, covering her hand with his own. This is about the Carbones testing boundaries they should have never crossed. This was always coming, Sophia. You simply became the reason it's happening now. Vincent cleared his throat. Boss, there's something else. Daniel is missing. He didn't show up at his apartment last night, and his phone is turned off. Marco's expression darkened further. Find him. If the Carbones took him, he might be useful information. If he ran, we need to know before he causes more problems. Over the following days, Marco's men worked quietly, gathering intelligence, strengthening security around Sophia, the office, and Marco's other properties. Sophia stayed close to Marco throughout, refusing to hide away in fear. Slowly, their relationship deepened, tested by the danger surrounding them, but somehow made stronger because of it. 5 days later, Vincent finally located Daniel. He was hiding in a cheap motel outside the city, terrified and alone. When Marco's men brought him in for questioning, Daniel admitted everything. The Carbones had promised to erase his debt completely if he gathered useful information about Marco's operations through Sophia. When his relationship with Sophia became real, he had tried to back out, but the Carbones threatened his life, forcing him to continue. They said if I stopped, they'd kill me, Daniel confessed, sitting nervously across from Marco in a private room. I panicked. I ran. I didn't know what else to do. Marco studied him carefully, feeling equal amounts of anger and something close to pity. Daniel was weak, easily manipulated, but Marco doubted he was truly dangerous himself. Here's what will happen, Marco said finally. You will leave this city permanently. Tonight, my men will provide you enough money to start over somewhere far from here. In exchange, you never speak of this again. Not about me, not about Sophia, not about the Carbones. Daniel nodded quickly, relief flooding his face. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Rossi. After Daniel left the city that same night, Marco turned his full attention toward the Carbone family. Rather than starting a violent war, Marco arranged a private meeting with the head of the Carbone family, presenting clear evidence of their involvement in the kidnapping attempt. "This ends now," Marco said calmly during the meeting, his voice carrying quiet authority. "You tested my boundaries, and you lost. I will not retaliate with violence today. But if anyone close to me is ever threatened again, there will be no more peaceful conversations. Only consequences." The Carbone leader, recognizing the seriousness in Marco's tone and the evidence laid before him, agreed to withdraw completely from Marco's territory, ending the conflict without further bloodshed. Weeks passed. Life slowly returned to normal, though normal now included Marco and Sofia officially being together, no longer hiding their relationship at the office. Sofia had grown more confident, no longer intimidated by the dangerous world Marco lived in, but rather standing firmly beside him, understanding and accepting every part of who he truly was. One evening, Marco took Sofia back to the same restaurant where he had first seen her on that fateful date with Daniel. This time, they sat together at his private booth, candlelight flickering softly between them. "Do you ever regret it?" Sofia asked quietly, looking into Marco's eyes. "Falling for someone in your world, all the danger, the complications." Marco reached across the table, gently taking her hand into his. "Sofia, the moment I saw you smiling at another man in this very restaurant, I realized something important. I had spent my entire life believing power and fear were the only things that truly mattered. But watching you, I understood I wanted something more, something real." Sofia smiled softly, squeezing his hand gently. "And now, Marco said, his gray eyes warm and certain, "I know exactly what matters most to me. It's you, Sofia. Only you." Sofia leaned across the table, pressing a gentle kiss to his lips, feeling safe, loved, and certain for the first time in her life about the path she had chosen. Outside the restaurant window, the city lights sparkled brightly, unaware of the dangerous world hidden just beneath its surface. But inside, in that quiet, candlelit booth, Marco Rossi and Sofia Bennett had found something rare and precious, a love strong enough to survive even the darkest of worlds.